Welcome to the Guinness Book of World Records rocket launch. We've been planning this for more than 2 years. And all of the sponsors and partners and friends here today, we love you, thank you. It wouldn't have been possible without you. And we're delighted to have you all here. We're celebrating today Huntsville, the rocket city, the accomplishments of the Saturn V, arguably the most important accomplishment of mankind, landing on the moon and returning them safely to Earth. People leave that out a lot, but that's really important for humankind. We're delighted to have you, and I'm going to turn it over this morning to our own Randall Robinson, who's going to MC the program and the launch for us. Good morning, Randall, and welcome everyone to the World Record Rocket Launch.
Thank you, Dr. Barnhart. Good morning, everyone. As I said, my name is Randall Robinson. I will be your MC for the U.S. Space and Rocket Center's Guinness Book of World Records rocket launch and global rocket launch kickoff. First, I'd like to introduce Homer Hickam. Homer is the chairman of the Alabama Space Science Exhibit Commission, who oversees what we do at the Rocket Center and is one of the original Rocket Boys. Homer.
Thank you. All right, welcome all you rocket girls and rocket boys. It's great to see you this morning. It's going to be just like you pressed the button this morning, so this is just going to be amazing. And if my mom's watching down from heaven, no, Elsie, we're not going to blow ourselves up. I want to welcome you to our Apollo 11 50th anniversary rocket launch. We'd like to start with a few thank yous. Thank you to our Apollo 50th Golden Anniversary sponsor, Intuitive Research and Technology. All right. You guys are great. We love you. We love you. Our event presenting sponsor, the Boeing Company, our F1 engine sponsors, Window World, Lockheed Martin, and ULA, and our blast-off sponsors, KBR, LSINC, Raytheon, and BAE Systems, and a special thanks for the support from UAH and Huntsville Utilities. We also, all right, keep the water going, keep the power. We also have a special group of people here on our behalf to certify our record for the Guinness Book of World Records. They're probably hanging out right at the rockets. They're probably under those little modules there. A team led by Chris Crumbly, Executive Director of the Von Braun Center for Science and Innovation. He and his group have generously donated their time and expertise to serve as expert witnesses for Guinness. They'll be inspecting our rockets, counting how many we have, counting how many launch, all of them, and assisting with the final countdown to ensure timing and legitimacy of our launch for Guinness. So thank you very much, folks, and let's go for launch.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We've just passed the 56-minute mark in our countdown. We're still proceeding in an excellent manner at this time. All elements reporting in that all systems continuing to look good at this point. We're still aiming toward our planned liftoff at the start of the lunar window, 9:32 a.m. Eastern Daylight. A short while ago, in fact, the spacecraft test conductor skipped. We were doing quite well. In fact, some 15 minutes ahead on some aspects of the preparation spacecraft-wise. Armstrong replied that was fine, just as long as we don't launch 15 minutes early, obviously referring to the start of the window. The countdown is still going well, T-minus 55 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
So that was Public Affairs Office recording from July 16th, 1969, live from Cape Canaveral. Public Affairs Officer Jack King, known as the Voice of Apollo, narrated the entirety of the lead up to the liftoff of Apollo 11 from approximately 6 a.m. Eastern until liftoff at 9:32 a.m. That time is important to us here because we'll be lifting off 5,000 rockets simultaneously in sync with the exact moment 50 years ago when Apollo 11 left Launch Pad A at Complex 39. Instead of launching a Saturn V, though, we will be launching ST's Pathfinder rockets. the rockets we actually use with many of our Space Camp programs. We'll be doing this to achieve a new world record. In order to count for the record standard, we need them to pass 100 feet in altitude, and we have Redstone Test Center and UAH's Systems Management and Production Center to thank for helping us verify that. Redstone worked with us on a verification method for the record, and UAH will be helping us with, as you can see, 2 weather balloons, drones, and cameras for video confirmation of breaking the altitude. Now, let me ask you all a question. How do you build 5,000 rockets? One at a time? Okay. So, you get some, yes. Help and teamwork. Raise your hand who said that. Perfect. Bravo. That's exactly what we did. Our rockets were built by volunteers. Community, business, and our own team here at the Space and Rocket Center all worked together to get our rockets and our launch pads built. I'd like to take the time to thank Jared Green, our volunteer-in-chief and engineer for Boeing SLS. He worked with myself, Robin Soprano, our technical director, and many others who helped to coordinate volunteer efforts to build both our rockets and launch pads. In total, between our rocket construction days and our volunteer efforts, we had close to 400 volunteers, giving more than 1,000 hours of volunteer time to help us with this endeavor. I'd like to give another thank you to them, sitting over here, and to all of our partners for the help and assistance we've been given today. So speaking of Jared, he's sitting here right next to me. Jared, thank you so much for your assistance through all this.
It was my pleasure.
So what has it meant for you and Boeing as our launch sponsor to be involved throughout all of this?
Well, it's a tremendous honor because Boeing has been a part of the Saturn V program, and so being a part of this particular endeavor is also just a tremendous honor for both the company and also the people who helped out.
So being a rocket scientist engineer who works on SLS, how did building our model rockets compare to the work in your day job?
It's more or less the same thing. You have to start from design, which we had initially was a design, and then from the design you go into the production and manufacturing, which we also did with all those wonderful volunteers. And so it's more or less the same process, scaled down just a little bit, but it's more or less the same thing.
So what do you hope everyone here and everyone watching around the world will take from our event?
That anything is possible with a large group of willing people who's willing to come forward and to work on such a great project.
Jared, thank you for your time and your support. We now go back to our countdown to Apollo, launching 5,000 rockets for the 50th anniversary of our first trip to the moon. Jared, thank you.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We've passed the 46-minute mark in our countdown. T-minus 45 minutes, 52 seconds, and counting. All elements still go in the countdown at this time. The hard worker in the spacecraft at this point in the countdown, astronaut Buzz Aldrin in the middle seat. He's been working with the spacecraft test conductor on setting up proper switch settings in preparation for pressurizing their reaction control system. These are these big thrusters on the side of the service module. There's actually 16 of them in 4 quadrants around the service module. They are used for maneuvers in space. We pressurize that system before liftoff. That particular operation will be coming up in some 5 minutes or so. In preparation for it, Buzz Aldrin, who has most of the switches in front of him, has been preparing for that particular event. The launch vehicle people keeping an eye on the status of the various propellants aboard the Saturn V launch vehicle. Just at liftoff, we will have a vehicle weighing close to 6.5 million pounds on the launch pad. There's more than 1 million gallons of propellants aboard the 3 stages of the Saturn V. The reports here in the control center are the propellants are stable. We did take a look a little while ago at the RP1, the high-grade kerosene fuel that's used in the first stage of the Saturn V, to make sure it was at its proper level. We keep an eye on these various aspects throughout the count and use the aid of computers to keep an overall look on general status. We're now at T-minus 44 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
All right, so how's everybody doing today? We having fun? Yeah? Has anybody ever seen a rocket launch before? Raise your hand if you've seen a rocket launch. Raise your hand if you've seen more than one launch at the same time. Raise your hand if you've seen more than 100 launch at the same time. Oh, I saw some trainees' hands. That's a lot of rockets. So, to give you an idea, we actually had to clear this with Redstone Airfield to make sure we were okay to launch this many rockets all at once. We're close enough to 2 different airports that our rockets might actually show up on radar, if that gives you any idea of what kind of power we're going to be putting into the air today. We have our next interview up in a moment, but first I'm going to go over that second public affairs officer recording. So that recording made mention of the weight of the Saturn V rocket. Space Camp trainees, you know how much Saturn V weighs? A lot. Excellent answer. Many, many pounds. So too much to carry, yeah, that's pretty accurate. So to give you an idea, the Saturn V fully loaded up weighs 6.5 million pounds. And most of that is fuel. And we needed to have all of that fuel to be able to power such an immense rocket to get up to space. How many engines does Saturn V had, trainees? No. 11. The booster stages, there were 11 engines total. The first stage was 5 F1 engines, right? That's why it's Saturn V. Burned through 2.1 million liters of fuel, which is RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen, in 2.5 minutes. Our rockets, Pathfinders, will be using a solid rocket propellant. Our motors are black powder, like gunpowder. They burn for a little more than 1/4 of a second, creating enough thrust to send our rocket, which only weighs 1.4 ounces, more than 100 feet into the air. Now, we'll also need a unique way to light our rockets, not unlike the Saturn V. Do you know how many engines the F1 motor has in it? 2. So it had one engine just to pump the fuel into the engine area, and then another to ignite and launch with that fuel. The first motor that pumps the fuel itself is 55,000 horsepower. And it was only there again to pump fuel into the actual engine thrusting the rocket into the air. Now the main motor generated more than 32 million horsepower. Thrust-wise, the F1 engine on the Saturn V is 971,000 times more powerful than the rockets we'll be using today. Now, weighing 6.5 million pounds means it needs all of that thrust. Now, while our motors generate just over 2 pounds of thrust, we have a thrust-to-weight ratio of 23 times to 1. And we only needed 1.2 to 1 to launch the Saturn V. I'd like to bring up to the stage Jody Singer. Jody is director of Marshall Space Flight Center. Marshall does all of the heavy lifting to make sure NASA's rockets go as fast and as far as we need them to. Ladies and gentlemen, Jody Singer. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. Good morning. Jody,
Good morning.
Thank you for taking some time out this morning to hang out with us today.
Well, thank you. This is a lot of fun. We're going to be launching a rocket, huh?
ma'am.
A lot of rockets.
So, Jody, if you wouldn't mind telling us, what is it like to be the first woman to hold the same job that Dr. Werner von Braun once held?
I guess your first expression is wow. But I would tell you, I've worked very hard my whole career and had a lot of great mentors who helped me get to where I am. And I would tell you, I like to say I'm an engineer, I'm a manager, I'm a leader who happens to be a woman. And I'll tell you, yeah, I'm the first. So somebody's got to be first sometime, right? All y'all, you got to be first? And so it's really fun, and I really enjoy it. And not only do I think I represent women, I represent anybody that can be the first at anything you want to do. So I encourage you, always strive to be the first and do what you can, build your career, build yourself, learn from it, and then learn from your successes and your failures. Because I'll tell you, I've had plenty of those, but I'll tell you, it all shapes you and leads you so that you can do great things like launch rockets and work with NASA. And I wouldn't take anything for it. It's a wonderful experience.
So working at Marshall, which did all of the work really necessary for our success 50 years ago, looking back on it, could you touch on what Marshall's doing as we look forward to go back to the moon and go even further?
Absolutely. So Marshall Space Flight Center, with many of our partners and really this whole community, this is Rocket City. So we are definitely involved. When you think about from launch to landing, Marshall Space Flight Center has been a part of it in our history. So when you look back over 50 years and you think of all the things that we've done from our propulsion and everything that we've done to get astronauts into space, when I look going forward, we'll be doing the same thing. When you think 50 years from now, and really only a few years from now, we'll be launching the Space Launch System, which is the largest vehicle ever flown and the most powerful vehicle. And so when you think about it, it'll be taking us to deep space. The Space Launch System is the only vehicle that has the capability to take the Orion space capsule and the systems needed in one launch to be able to go to deep space. So we're a critical part of being able to launch not only the Orion, which will take us to the moon by 2024 with the first woman and next man, but also sustained presence by 2028. And then from there, it just opens up everything that we can do when you think about all the systems and things we'll be working on.
Anybody sitting in this crowd think they're going to be that first person to get back to the moon?
How
There's a
about,
couple
how many
hands.
of you are going to
Yeah.
think you're going to be the ones going to Mars?
Right there? You? All right. Well, Jody, thank you again for coming out and being with us today. Thank you for all the work you're doing at Marshall.
Thank you.
Keep your eyes on the prize. Thank you, ma'am.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank y'all. Let's go launch some rockets. Let's go launch.
considers to consider. I do see people up moving around. That's not a problem. But we do want to make sure you, our audience, are always kept safe. Please make sure to respect the safe zones. We have the orange paint, and it's actually written safety zone out on the road. And be observant and ready in case we have to give any last-minute instruction. Thank you.
Apollo Saturn launch control. We've just passed the 31-minute mark in our count. The T-minus 30 minutes, 52 seconds and counting, aiming toward our planned liftoff time of 32 minutes past the hour, the start of our launch window on this mission to land men on the moon. The countdown still proceeding very satisfactorily at this time. We just got by on important tests with the launch vehicle, checking out the various batteries in the 3 stages and instrument unit of the Saturn V. We remain on external power through most of the count to preserve those batteries which must be used during the powered flight. We've just taken a look at them by going internal and then switching back to external again. The batteries all look good. The next time we go internal will be at the 50-second mark with those batteries, and they will remain, of course, on internal power during the flight. The lunar module, which has been rather inactive during these latter phases of the count, also is going on internal power at this time on the 2 batteries in the ascent stage and the 4 batteries at the descent stage. For the next 20 minutes, we'll take a look at some systems in the lunar module, then power down at about the 10-minute mark in the count, power down the telemetry to preserve the power of the LEM. The lunar module in Apollo 11, of course, when it separates from the command module in lunar orbit, will have the call sign Eagle. The command module call sign, once the 2 vehicles separate, will be Columbia. Both Columbia and Eagle are go at this time at 29 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
So as made mention in that PAO recording, there were final electrical and computer checks that had to be done to make sure the Saturn V lifted off properly. Our rockets need electricity to lift off as well. Our solid motors need a quick ignition source, something that gets hot enough to ignite the black powder inside. We're using an E-match, or an electronic match. This is a fireworks-grade pyrotechnic device that ensures high temperature. It uses electricity to superheat a bridge wire, and that bridge wire gets hot enough to reach the ignition temperature of the black powder inside of our motors. Now, to power our rockets, we have Huntsville Utilities to thank. Huntsville Utilities has been an integral part of all of our project preparation. They laid out power drops and a secondary transformer so that we would have electricity directly to the launch area. Each launch ring not only has its own direct power source, but it's connected to a custom-built controller for synchronizing the launch. I'd like to thank our consultant, Mike Strang, who is on the stage right now. Mike is an experienced rocketeer, having worked with the Boy Scouts to set a previous world record launch. Mike developed these controllers and helped us prototype and design our launch pads to get our rockets all launched simultaneously. Thank you for your help, Mike, in setting this world record today. Now, I'd also like to introduce one of our honorary chairs for the 50th anniversary celebrations here at the Space and Rocket Center, Dr. Margaret Von Braun. We are so honored to have you and your family here today to celebrate the legacy of your father and everything we've done.
Thank you.
So you were 17 when Apollo left and launched it?
I was.
So what was it like being at the Cape all of that time, especially as a high schooler?
Well, it was my first launch, so
Wow.
I didn't really know what to expect. And like most people say, it's hard to describe that rumble and that roar and that big noise. It was certainly an exciting day. We're going to see a mini version of it today.
I think so, yes, ma'am. So what do you think your father would think of what we're doing here this morning?
Oh, he would be thrilled. But I have a question on behalf of my dad that he would ask all the space campers here. How many of you are going to be astronauts? All right. And how many of you, maybe older people who are not space campers, wish you were astronauts? So we're pretty excited to have this liftoff today.
Yes, we are. This is going to be awesome. Margaret, is there anything else that you want to say to them, especially given the momentous event that we're taking place in?
Well, Apollo 11 really reminds us what human beings are capable of. We have done an incredible thing getting to the moon, and it just reminds us that people can do amazing things. So whatever your dream is, you can do it. We went to the moon, and that's a pretty high bar, and it means we're capable of doing anything we want to do that is in your panel of dreams. So good luck to you.
Dr. Von Braun, on behalf of the Space and Rocket Center, on behalf of Space Camp, and on behalf of this event, thank you so much for coming
Thank you.
out today.
Thanks.
Dr. Margaret Von Braun, everyone. So you might be asking yourself, we're just sitting here and it's quiet and there's not a lot going on, but we've got something very important, very special.
Hi, Randall.
Hello, sir. Your name is Colonel Warden, correct?
They told me to come up and sit down. I'm Al Warden.
This is Colonel Al Warden.
Good morning.
So, Colonel Warden, I understand that you and Space Camp and Space and Rocket Center hopefully will have something in common here in the next 19 minutes and 18 seconds.
Well, they didn't launch 5,000 of me. Just one. But this is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I understand the record is 4,000 something?
4,231.
4,231. Wow, and you're going to launch 5,000 rockets today? Absolutely amazing. I hope it's worth it for everybody to be here. I think you're going to have a good time. Good time.
That was actually what I was about to say first. I wanted to thank again our volunteers who've been out here since 5 a.m., our camp crew trainers hanging out, all of our trainees who made it out, and all the public hanging out with us today. Thank you all again for coming out. Now, Colonel Warden, what I was wondering about was the fact that you yourself hold a world record or two.
Yeah, I got a couple.
You got a couple?
Yeah, no, that's funny. I have 2 Guinness World Records. Now, get this. World record for doing something at the moon. Now, go figure. How can you get a world record for doing something at the moon?
It's a solar system record.
Yeah, something like that.
So could you tell us about the records that you have?
Well, I think I got I got a Guinness record. Incidentally, Guinness records are no longer part of Guinness beer. I found that out because when I got the certificate, I was really more interested in giving me a beer. But Guinness records are are independent, and I got the first one was for being the most isolated human in history, which I'm not really sure about. I think other guys might have been as isolated somewhere along the line. And then the second one was for doing the first deep space spacewalk or extravehicular activity, which I did on the way home from the moon. That was the second one.
Excellent. So just to make sure everyone knows, Colonel Warden was command module pilot?
Command module pilot, right.
On Apollo 15.
I've been lucky enough to do what I suspect everybody in this audience would like to do. And that was a long time ago, and I was very, very lucky to get that job.
So you were part of astronaut class 5, correct?
Class, yeah, selection group 5, yeah.
Class of 1966.
Correct. There were 19 of us picked. Over 800 applied, and they picked 19.
The original 19, correct?
Well, something like that. Yeah, right.
So the reason I asked that is because, of course, we're here celebrating the Apollo program. Apollo 11 was 3 years after you were selected as an astronaut. What were
Correct.
you doing for Apollo 11?
Well, I didn't focus on Apollo 11. I did a lot of things for a lot of flights.
Okay.
Basically, we had a terrible accident at the Cape back in 1967 when we burned up a command module. We lost the crew. And I was on the team that was selected to rebuild the command module. So I spent all my time basically at the manufacturer out in California working on a spacecraft. And once we got it fixed so that we could go again, then I was on a team that ran every spacecraft down the assembly line through all the stuff that we needed to take a look at. So basically, I spent all my time on the assembly line out at North American. It was a good time. I was, when Apollo 11 landed, I was sitting in an airplane, ready to go back to Houston, and I delayed my takeoff long enough to listen to the air-to-ground and listen to Neil talk about landing on the moon. And once he landed, then I took off and went back to Houston.
Where were you for the launch?
I was in Downey, California, which is where North American Rockwell is located, working on the assembly line.
Okay. So last question. We've got almost 1,000 space camp trainees hanging out with us.
I understand,
right
over 1,000.
I mean, we've got,
Yeah.
It's a big number.
Amazing, wonderful thing.
Do you have a
Great
message
thing.
for any of them?
All I can say, I think if you get anything out of space camp at all, it is excitement about the space program. I think it's excitement about what you're going to do when you grow up and what kind of things you're going to take when you go to college. And I'm hopeful that by going to space camp, you're going to be motivated to take science, technology, engineering, or math programs, so that the day will come when you will be responsible for building a spacecraft that takes us to Mars. And I think there could be somebody in this group here that'll probably make the trip to Mars. I see that happening. I think by the time you kids grow up, we're going to be sending people to Mars, and you could be one of them. But I think more importantly, you might be part of the group that designs the spacecraft that goes to Mars. And that's why I think science, technology, engineering, math are so important. I don't see an attorney or a CPA or a dentist or a doctor designing the kind of spacecraft that could take us to Mars. But I see engineers and mathematicians and scientists doing that, and that's what I think is so important for us.
Colonel Warden, thank you so much for your time.
My
Ladies
pleasure.
and gentlemen, one more for Al Warden.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We've passed the 11-minute mark. Now T-minus 10 minutes, 54 seconds on our countdown for Apollo 11. All still go at this time. The astronauts in the spacecraft busy again. The Commander Neil Armstrong has performed some final switch settings for the stabilization and control system of the spacecraft. The spacecraft also now is on full internal power. This came shortly after the 15-minute mark. Spacecraft now on the full power of its fuel cells. Up to this time, it had been sharing the load with an external power source. Both Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin have armed their rotational hand controllers, the controllers they use in flight. And we have now gone to automatic system with the emergency detection system, that system that would cue the astronauts if there's trouble down below with the Saturn V rocket during the powered flight. We're now coming up on the 10-minute mark, 10 minutes away from our planned liftoff. Mark T-minus 10 minutes and counting. T-minus 10. We're aiming for our plane
10
liftoff
minutes.
at 32 minutes past the hour. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
So that announcement you just heard was key in helping the public understand just what was going on with the three astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, in the command module on top of that giant Saturn V rocket. It was a controllable rocket. The rocket used computers to adjust or gimbal the engines a certain way to make sure that the rocket would roll and adjust itself in flight through the atmosphere and into space. Once in orbit and headed out to deep space, the flight also had manual control with an RCS, or reactionary control system. The astronauts could use that in space to adjust the command and service modules while orbiting the moon to make sure everything was just right. Our rockets, on the other hand, do not have anything like that. They are very much just point and shoot. We have them all ready to go in 5 rings, representing the 5 F1 engines of the first stage of the Saturn V, and pointed straight up, of course, with both a primary and secondary launch guide. The fins on our rocket also serve a slightly different purpose. On a giant rocket like the Saturn V, the fins help the astronauts safely abort in case of an aerodynamic problem. When you have a giant rocket generating that much thrust going into the air, accidental roll or pitch or anything else that happens could be a grave concern, especially in the case of a malfunction. The fins were there to keep the rocket as stable as possible, only if the capsule had to separate in case of an abort. Our rockets are small enough that the fins serve as a basic aim assist and aerodynamic stabilization. They help make sure the rockets launch as straight as possible and that they stay straight throughout their ascent. Now, given that, it's important to make sure that, again, we respect the safety zone area. Please stay off the field during and right after the launch. We will be collecting the rockets after launch. We will ensure their safety by removing motors, and we will have them available as souvenirs throughout the day. Thank you again for respecting the safety zone. Please enjoy your time. We are now under 7 minutes and 3, 2, 1, 30 seconds and counting. Thank you.
minutes, 15 seconds. The test supervisor now has informed launch vehicle test conductor Norm Carlson you are go for launch. From this time down, Carlson handles the countdown as the launch vehicle begins to build up. We're now hitting the 4-minute mark. 4 minutes and counting. We are go for Apollo 11. We'll go on an automatic sequence starting at 3 minutes and 7 seconds. 3 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. And the final abort checks between several key members of the crew here in the control center and the astronauts. Launch operations manager Paul Donnelly wished the crew on the launch team's behalf good luck and Godspeed. 3 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. We're still go at this time. We'll be coming up in the automatic sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from this time. All still go at this time. Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. Firing command coming in now. We are on the automatic sequence. We're approaching the 3-minute mark in the count. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. T-minus 3. We are go with all elements of the mission at this time. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. T-minus 2 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. The members of the launch team here in the control center monitoring a number of what we call red line values. These are tolerances we don't want to go above and below in temperatures and pressures. They're standing by to call out any deviations from our plans. 2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. We're still go on Apollo 11 at this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our status board. 2 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts, the moon at liftoff, will be at a distance of 218,096 miles away. We just passed the 2 minutes.
So at this time, 50 years ago, the Apollo 11 mission was on automatic control, similar to our launch here. We've cleared the range, we've tested and inspected our rockets, we're doing final power checks right now. We've monitored wind, weather, and everything that we can observe to make sure conditions are ideal. We will do a 1-minute hold to make sure that everything is good to go, and then we will give a count, and we'd like everybody to count down with us from 1 minute once we get started. Again, we will be holding at 1 minute to make sure that everything is perfect, and then we will be going. Thank you.
So will your clock guy know to do that?
Yes.
Okay, are we turning it around? So do we need to change it? Okay, so we're gonna have to switch sides. Yep. They told me it was gonna be that way. Sorry.
Gary. Gary.
Are we good? We can keep counting? We can keep counting, or do we need to hold? Okay. Once the key gets up here, we'll start. Okay.
Yeah, so let's just switch positions, guys. So we'll do a little do-si-do around the table.
And then we can count backwards.
We're good. Or our holding. You know, come on, just stop, right? Exactly. Just do it how you do it.
You're right.
I did shuttle launches. Exactly. We're not do-si-do, you guys.
This is so cool.
It doesn't look, I mean,
Yeah, because the key's on that side now. So we'll just...
300. So for those of you who can see the field, again, you can see Mike Strang, our consultant. He's doing the final power checks, powering up our final grids. Once you see him heading over to the vehicle, he'll be driving over to hand off the arming key. Once that handoff happens, we will start the count back from 1 minute.
guys excited?
Space Camp, are we excited? I can't tell. Space Camp, are we excited?
Yeah, we'll count down from 1 minute.
Count down from 1 minute. Okay. That means I've got to know 59, 58.
Yeah, we got to remember how to count backwards.
Mike Strang is entering the vehicle. The key is on the way.
He is coming.
Hey, mission control. All right, so you officially go for launch?
Here's the key. I am turned it on. Okay. Yeah, it's 5 green lights. 5 green lights.
5 green lights. Go for launch.
The handoff is confirmed. Hold restarted from 1 minute.
Someone's standing on the ladder. We've got our ladder on the side of the trailer.
We are armed. T minus 30. 25. 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll be reviewing our video footage with our Guinness experts today. We will submit our evidence to Guinness for authentication. When that happens, when that happens, we will be the proud owners of the new world record for most model rockets launched simultaneously. Now, I've got to ask you all to do one more thing. To those of you here today, and to those of you watching at home, at school, wherever you are around the world, go launch a rocket today. help us commemorate this momentous day, launch day of Apollo 11. It was this day that man first took that giant leap. Take your leap today. Post your rocket launches on social media. Use our hashtag Global Rocket Launch. Share this day with everyone. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day, everyone.